In our modern times, the season of fall or autumn can make us think plenty of different things, especially depending on where we are in the world. Here in the Midwest of Indiana, I grew up in an area where fall meant we've got to bring the harvest in. And that is very similar to the 18th century. We've got to bring harvest in. We have repairs to do on our property. We have to get ready for winter. Because winter is when things get bleak. Nobody wants to go outside. Nobody can do labor outside, depending on the situations, because it's too cold. So right now is the most exciting time because we're experiencing the fruits of our labors. And we get to bring in everything that we've planted and all the animals that we've raised. We get to create food out of them, but also it may be the most stressful time of year. For the hog farmer in the time period, this is time to slaughter. You're gonna space that around the whole calendar depending on what you need meat for. But right now, is time for harvesting the majority of your pigs. And they're going to be drying them, they're going to be smoking them, they're going to be salting them, and they're going to store back for winter. There's this little period of time right now where you're going to get something that's nice and fresh, and you're going to be able to eat it right there as a celebration. And even where I live, where I grew up, we have harvest festivals, right? We're doing the same thing where they're celebrating fall because they're bringing in a harvest, and there's this moment of excitement where thank you, Lord, for everything that you've given us. Thank you, friends, for helping me bring in the crops, and we're getting together and we're celebrating, but we know the hard times are coming. So the farmer of the 18th century was in a precarious situation because they thought of themselves as strong, hardy men. They thought of themselves as people that could do things and could handle things that maybe city folks couldn't handle. And they were proud of what they did because they provided food for themselves and for the people around them. But the problem was, and it seems like if you're reading the 18th century context and diaries of farmers, it seems there's a shift where back in Greek times and Roman times, the farmer was kind of lifted high and celebrated. And now in these complicated times, we're coming up on the Industrial Revolution pretty soon, and everything is getting a little bit more scientific. The farmer doesn't seem to be as celebrated. Now they felt good about themselves and they felt good about the work that they were doing, but they're not sure how people feel about them around in the community. So this is the time where the farmer really gets to shine because he's bringing in a crop and he is bringing in his livestock and able to kind of turn that outward towards the community, and they can all benefit from the labors of the farmer. Now imagine that you lived in a situation, and maybe you do, where you kind of work all year building up to one particular place where it can all be spectacular or it can go wrong. In the time period, we don't have a whole lot of farmers insurance and that sort of thing. They can lose everything if not everything comes together in the right way right now at harvest time. So ripeness is an issue, moisture, weather, all of these things are playing into, is their crop going to come in and is it going to be good? Are they going to lose it? If they get a huge storm, is the field going to flood? What's going to happen? And so they have all of these things playing in their heads. But also, this is the time of year, especially in a place where you're going to experience a cold, bleak winter, where you have to finish the upkeep on your house. You have to make sure that it's patched up tight. You have to make sure the firewood's ready. Everything is building up to right now. This is also something that we have to think about, where a lot of these hogs, especially with hogs, they're free ranging and they're in the woods and they're kind of rooting up their food and they're eating acorns and they're eating, moss and all sorts of different things. But now it's time to bring them into pens. You also have to build that and make sure those pens are ready to hold them. What you're not going to slaughter, you're going to need to hold through winter, and you're going to have to keep them warm and safe. So there's just a ton that's going on with livestock right here. And that's only hogs. Most of these farmers, they would have cattle and they would have sheep. There's all kinds of stuff to think about. One of the things that we need to remember when we're thinking about farmers in the time period is that they're not keeping the best for themselves, right? So this pork loin here, this is a wonderful kind of meat. They're probably never going to touch that. But they're taking hogsheads and they're sousing them and they're using that as nourishment, and they're eating the feet and they're eating the tails and they're eating every portion of the animal. Some of it will be salted and packed like we've done several times in this channel, where you see us make a brine and use salt and make salt pork. Some of it is belly meat where it's going to be used for bacon. Some of it's going to be smoked. So everything is being used, but a lot of that animal is going to be outsourced and actually sent out in the community for people to buy from butchers. because they also need an income off of this. It's not just about getting through the winter, it's also about being able to pay their bills and have a livelihood. And so, who knows, maybe this farmer, depending on its stature, maybe he's not eating very great meat off of this hog at all. Maybe he's just keeping the worst cuts for himself. But even still, harvest time, he might be able to cut a little piece of this loin and have a nice meal. This recipe for pork cutlets comes from Charlotte Mason's 1773 book, The Lady's Assistant, and it goes like this. Pork cutlets. Skin a loin of pork and divide it into cutlets. Strew some parsley and thyme cut small, some pepper, salt, and grated bread over them. Broil them of a fine brown. Have ready some good gravy, a spoonful of ready-made mustard, 2 shallots shred small. Boil these together over the fire, thickened with a piece of butter rolled in flour and a little vinegar. If agreeable, put the cutlets into a hot dish and pour the sauce over them. The reason I picked this recipe is because it's so interesting that you can have something very similar to what we will have on our modern tables with just a little bit of a historical twist. Now, this is a good recipe for right at harvest time, right when you have fresh pork, because we're going to use a pork loin here, and it doesn't have to be something that's been dried or smoked or pickled or salted or anything like that. We're just going to use a fresh loin. We're going to cut this up into essentially pork chops. So we're making a breaded pork chop dish with a gravy, which is delicious, and we're going to really enjoy this with the mustard and the vinegar in there. I think it's going to be awesome. Now, you can use a pork loin roast like I have. You can use a whole pork loin, or you could even go to the grocery store and get loin chops if you want to. But we're going to take those, we're going to salt, pepper, and we're going to chop up our herbs really finely, and we're going to put those and press them in, and then we're going to get them in breadcrumbs and crust the whole outside of them. This calls for a broil. So what we're going to do in this particular instance is a pan broil. That's going to be the easiest for you to do at home, but you could use the element in your oven as a broiler if you want to. You could also, if you're out and about at a campsite, you can do this over the coals. What a broil wants is a nice, hot, roasty, direct heat. So that's what we're going to do here today. After we get our pork chops breaded and we get them cooked, then we're going to start working on our sauce here. And it calls for a good gravy in this particular instance, because what it wants us to do is thicken this as we go. What they're calling for as a gravy here is just the broth of the meat that we're cooking. Or if you have any broth from something that you've cooked recently, you can use that too. So we're essentially going to deglaze this pan with some more broth. And then we're going to add our made mustard. And if you guys want to just use something like a brown mustard or a gray poupon or something like that, you can, or you can create a mustard from mustard seed if you want to, if you have the time to do that. But we're going to add that. We're going to add a little bit of vinegar. We're going to get all of that cooking in our skillet with our chopped up shallots. And all those flavors are going to combine. The butter is going to melt. It's going to put some nice fattiness in there. And then the flour is going to help thicken everything up. Once you're done doing that, you're going to have your pork cutlets. They're already in a pan or a bowl, and you're just going to pour the sauce over top, and then we're good to go. We can eat it. Here's our dish. It smells wonderful in here. This looks great. Our crust from the breadcrumbs is really crisped up nicely on this. I don't know. The sauce has a lot of acidity in it, so we're going to see what happens there. I'm feeling like that, you know, this book hasn't steered me wrong before. It should be fine. Okay. Yeah, the breadcrumbs are nice and crunchy, and that's something that you need to stand up to the amount of sauce that you have here. The sauce has a lot of acidity, but the amount of butter that goes into it kind of helps carry it through. And then the herbs that are on the pork itself, they kind of sing through. So it's nice and bright. It's a really nice dish. So in what we've been talking about today, we're getting ready to head into winter. And winter starts, the preparation is at harvest time. So this is kind of the last bright moment before we get into the bleak winter. And what a way to finish it off with something like this. This just sings, it pops, and your taste buds just kind of celebrate with it. I recommend you try this recipe, even at this time of year. If you wanted to do something interesting with some apples in this dish, it would be really great. So like an apple sauce instead of this sauce, but it makes me think of fall. It's a really good dish. I think that you'd like it. Try it at home, and let's get ready for winter.